Hello, wherever this finds you today, and welcome to today's webinar on how to launch an M2M customer in 30 days. This promises to be a fascinating discussion on the tricky issue of achieving a speedy and a low-cost rollout of new M2M services. My name is Jeremy Cowan. I'm the editor and co-founder of M2M Now, and as I say, we've got a great discussion for you today. It's on finding that elusive holy grail of a rapid time to market for new M2M services. But it's not just about speed. If you can accelerate time to market, you can go a long way to controlling operational costs, something for which your Chief Financial Officer will love you forever, well, at least for this financial year. We all know that M2M service providers are under immense pressure from their clients to roll out new services and to do so more rapidly. So today's discussion is particularly important for them. It will also be of interest, I'm sure, to anyone who wants to improve their service efficiency. Anyway, it's now my great pleasure to introduce you to our two speakers. They are Robin Duke-Woolley from Beecham Research and Tulsi Zeidman from NetCracker. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks very much. Robin here.
Hi, thank you, Jeremy. This is Tulsi.
Great to have you on the call, and let's press on. First of all, a little bit of background about our speakers. Robin is the founder and senior analyst at Beecham Research. He's not only one of the best-known and most respected names in machine-to-machine communications, but I'm pleased to say he's also a member of M2M Now's editorial advisory board. Beecham Research offers years of successful business experience. Many of you will have come across them at conferences before, coupled with extensive analysis experience, which they bring from both research and consulting practice. They also have research partners in many parts of the world. Now, Tulsi is the Director of Solution Engineering at NetCracker Technology. He works with communication service providers worldwide to develop innovative solutions for their complex and changing business challenges. Tulsi is a 15-year IT veteran with extensive experience of leading large software implementation teams. And with a skill set that encompasses both technology and business, Tulsi's background includes roles in software implementation, service operations, and in client engagement. His current focus at NetCracker includes M2M, e-commerce, managed services, and mobile app development. Now, as you'll have guessed, there's a lot to discuss, so I want to get cracking. In a moment, I will ask Robin to give us his overview of the problems that M2M service providers are facing and the nature of the challenge. This challenge is not just for service providers, of course, but for their systems vendors and integrators. For those of you with experience of business and operation support systems, NetCracker will undoubtedly be a very familiar name. But it might also be described as one of M2M's better-kept secrets. For example, how many of you knew before today that NetCracker can call on 14 years' experience in M2M? In a few minutes, Tulsi will describe just how different M2M service providers working in markets with very different levels of maturity are using a variety of network strategies to provide the right service without ever committing too many resources too soon. But more of that in a moment. Before we start, I just want to give you a quick reminder, and that is that this is a truly interactive webinar in two ways. First, of course, after the two presentations, we'll ask you to take part in an anonymous poll, and we'll bring you the results of the poll at the end of the webinar. Please do remember, I can't see how you voted, and nor can our panel, so feel free to tell us exactly what you think. And secondly, there will also be a question and answer session at the end. So you can send me your questions for our panelists at any time from now on. Just type them into the Ask a Question window on your screen. I will put as many of these questions as possible in the time available to our speakers during the hour. So please start sending me your questions right now. Now, without any further delay, I'd like to hand over the floor to the first of our speakers. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, so my first slide is really from a survey that we conducted at the back end of last year in November 2012, which was a survey of M2M solution providers. And the key question that we asked them are, what are the primary drivers behind your M2M projects now? So I think that's a very relevant question to be asking as part of this webinar. The results were pretty clear that the majority thought that M2M solutions enable new services primarily, but also the secondary driver is creating operational efficiency and reducing costs. Those two are clearly key. It's interesting that that survey showed them that way around, because if we'd done that study 3 years ago, it probably would have been the other way around. But either of those, for example, any delay in the first M2M solutions either enable new services. Any delay in the first of those pushes back new revenue opportunities if you delay bringing a new service to market. And then if you delay operational efficiency and reducing costs, creating operational efficiency, then clearly that also pushes back cost reduction. So the key point from that is that any delay to either of these is going to increase implementation costs and project costs, and it's also going to affect either revenue or costs in a negative way. All that means is that the need for speed to market is paramount in introducing new solutions to the M2M market. Moving on then to the next slide, some key factors in the M2M market. The market is, of course, growing quickly. Just taking M2M cellular network connections, we're looking at a growth rate of 25 to 30% per annum growth worldwide, and the prospects for the future are for faster growth as new product groups come to market. So we're heading to something like 400 million cellular M2M connections worldwide by 2016, from just over 100 million connections in 2011. And that's, as I say, just cellular M2M on its own. That doesn't include fixed line, and it doesn't include short-range radio, which add to the expansion of the M2M market. So that's a potential strong growth rate that we think could develop further over the next few years. And then there's this issue of M2M that it has a long value chain. There are many elements within bringing a solution to market, from a hardware supplier through integration to middle software application suppliers, and then system integration and the service provider to the end user. That can mean a long time to market. Customized solutions have a high cost, so anything that can be done to pre-customize or pre-configure solutions is a good thing. Anything that can be done to reduce the time to market and reduce the costs of doing so will help to grow the market more quickly. Moving on then to the third slide. This is a slide that we often use to show the breadth of the M2M market, 9 key sectors, and within that, lots of different devices on the outer edge of the sector map that could be connected and through which new service opportunities can be created in the M2M market. It's very broad, many applications. but it's also quite fragmented. It's very unlikely that you'll find one service provider in one sector also providing services in another sector. So, for example, a service provider offering services in the industrial sector is unlikely to be offering services in the transport sector or the security sector and so forth. So it's quite fragmented, and that creates a lot of challenges. And with that, I'd like to lead us on to our next speaker, Tulsi Zeidman from NetCracker, who is going to talk about the way that NetCracker now approaches this market.
Okay, great. That was great. Well, thanks very much, Robin. And hello, everyone. My name is Tulsi Zeidman, and I'm with the Solution Engineering Group here at NetCracker. And I'm definitely excited to spend some time today sharing some of our experiences with M2M. And today we're going to cover a number of topics. I'll first give a brief introduction to NetCracker for those who aren't familiar with us, and also add a few thoughts to the comments Robin just made about the M2M market today. And then I'll discuss a fair bit on my particular area of interest, which is whether it makes sense for operators to invest in a dedicated platform for M2M, especially given the need to introduce new services to attract and retain M2M clients. And I'll also talk through the key criteria, at least in our view, for a successful platform and strategies that operators can use to help control their operational costs. And then finally, I'll share some of the strategies for how to ensure that rapid client launch and, conversely, the surefire easiest way to totally miss on a 30-day go-live. So with that said, we'll move on to our introduction of NetCracker. And it's certainly been an eventful half-decade for us, with NEC acquiring NetCracker in 2008, followed by consolidation of all of NEC's telecom assets under NetCracker. And then last year we had the very significant acquisition of Converge's information management business, which resulted in NetCracker now being one of the largest BSS and OSS providers in telecom. A clear outcome of these events is that NetCracker has a very broad footprint across the ETOM functional domains. But despite that market growth and our reach, we are the only solution provider with both a CMMI level 5, basically doing what we say we're going to do, when we say we're going to do it, and at the cost we say we'll do it for every single time. And also the TM Forum Frameworks 10 certification. And that's a very real achievement, proving out our conformance to frameworks. And as you can see, we're very well recognized in the industry for reasons such as these by Gartner, Frost & Sullivan, and so forth. And now more specifically to M2M, we have, as Jeremy pointed out, been serving this particular segment of the telecom industry for quite some time. And our set of solutions are able to work across a wide variety of industries. I mean, you just saw from Robin just how wide and the extensive breadth that M2M serves. We've supported the clients you see here and many others, and it's really thanks to the strong working relationships that we've developed over the years, and thanks to the support of our clients, that I'm able to be here today and share with you what we've been able to learn as we continue to forge ahead in growing this industry, and most importantly, providing value to the end consumer as we continue to innovate and provide real amazing services to consumers. So I'd like now just to add a few thoughts to some of the topics that Robin introduced a moment ago. First, as I think I've mentioned, M2M is definitely not a new thing. Last year, though, however, was, in my view, a really huge step forward for M2M as far as visibility in the industry, and also in subscriber growth and maturity of the solutions available. Already we can look around and point to examples in numerous industry verticals where we have established and rapidly growing M2M services. And this is things like fleet management. There's automation and connectivity now around security and home automation. There's tracking where your dog ran off to, and enabling new solutions for mobile payments at parking meters, vending machines. And in the case of our parent company, NEC, some really innovative solutions for agricultural monitoring and even tracking and aggregating data relative to radiation events. So M2M is here, and it's genuinely big. And for M2M and moving to a real-time world, so as I mentioned, we've seen a lot of big news, and This slide is a little bit more North America focused, but I've been involved with similarly significant events in EMEA and Asia Pac. But last year at CGI in New Orleans, AT&T made a big splash with their digital life and the digital home that they unveiled. Verizon has made, of course, some really big moves with the acquisitions of Enphase and Hughes Telematics, and Sprint and Exceed have announced a significant alliance. I think, as we look forward, it's going to be really interesting to see how these big players and others move more away from a batch, periodic type of M2M service to a more real-time service. And it's an area that I've been spending quite a bit of time looking into recently. The idea that we can move to real-time enablement of policies and real-time access to network services in an M2M space. So for the M2M software value chain, I have a bit of a simpler view of Robin's value chain here, but happily they are congruous. And I'll dwell a bit on this slide before I get into the real detail. But as Robin indicated, M2M really covers a huge functional and technical domain. For this type of a webinar, the audience might include people interested in device management, using any number of COTS or bespoke software. There could be people focused on the sale of actual physical devices or equipment, VARs who are buying connectivity from wireless operators and using that connectivity to join it with other services or products to serve a B2B market or a B2C market. Of course, we have operators themselves who are interested in growing their subscriber counts and growing their network utilization by selling wholesale connectivity to M2M service providers, and probably combinations of the above, or others I've left out as, this is a really evolving and dynamic space. But my focus today is really going to be on the operator and mostly those dark blue shapes there for network connectivity and connection management. I really think that operators can really best attract and serve their M2M wholesale clients, grow their subscriber count, and do it in a way that mitigates the talk about low ARPU and focus instead on revenue and profitability of this type of business. So we'll be focused on the operator, and operators themselves can really emphasize those dark blue network connectivity and connection management areas. But also, there's a lot of room to grow into the higher levels on the value chain to become a managed solution provider or provide those extra value-added services, serve industry verticals, and so on. So along those lines, just to call it out again, really to emphasize that operators have been treating M2M as an offline service. And I think that as we grow into those value-added services where really there is strong growth potential, you really need to start thinking about real-time, about policy control, about thresholds and alerts, and so on. And I've actually seen a couple of operators start to make some real strides to that recently with some innovative ideas. So it's really exciting to see developments like that. Right, so a separate stack for M2M. Do you need one? Well, the answer is that it really depends. Even in markets where there are large operators that are having success with M2M, in that same market, there might be other similarly big players on the sidelines somewhat. And I continue to be surprised as I get into discussions with very large operators to see really how much room there still is to grow and mature in the way in which operators are addressing the M2M market. And I'll discuss in a moment how, once you come to the conclusion that many operators get into a situation where they're really limiting their ability to compete in this space because M2M hasn't been a focus for them, relatively anyway, to maybe other lines of business. And although maybe there's been some type of large capital spend or some success with a few clients, their BSS and OSS systems just aren't in a state where the operator is going to have an easy time to be successful. So you see here some views on the different types of situations operators might be in the yellow, blue, and green box here. But the yellow one, so use this as provider. And this could be characterized as a wait-and-see approach with limited investment in M2M. There's definitely, with this approach, a low cost to get up and running, and you get the benefit of a type of SDK or application development accelerators, and you definitely have low operating costs. The downside can be that you need to live with some constraints, and it's usually a temporary solution until the business really takes off, or once you've launched a client on this type of a platform, it's hard to make changes going forward. And I say that because we at NetCracker, we've had operators on these types of platforms come to us and ask for for new solutions because their business is being held back due to a lack of flexibility that some of these types of solutions anyway can have. The blue box, option 2 there, would be use your existing OSS BSS stack. Combine M2M in with your retail and other wholesale and other types of B2B types of systems. Maybe you recognize the need to support M2M in-house, but you're in a market too small to invest in a dedicated stack, or you don't have the business case for it. And this is usually your smaller types of operators, or maybe an operator in a small country that's not an incumbent. But even in larger countries, we see operators in this situation, certainly. And then finally, option 3 would be use of the dedicated M2M stack, or your own platform for M2M. And I'll admit I'm definitely influenced by my experiences here, but in this case, an operator would recognize the need to support M2M in-house and has high expectations on market growth, has realized that sharing these business-critical systems across the different lines of business, so basically sharing M2M with retail business, it's just going to be too much of a constraint. And I would say that this is typical of incumbent operators or operators in larger countries, but surprisingly not all as a blanket rule. And just a note here, when I say stack or platform, I definitely don't mean a monolithic application, a single big monolithic application. A platform or a stack, this could be a group of systems or modules or whatever, depending on your particular approach. So what are the types of factors that an operator should consider when looking at whether to invest in a new system or systems for M2M? Well, the first is to recognize that we definitely have a fundamentally different business model. Just some examples with M2M, you need to aggregate billing usage and invoices. Your payment mechanisms and debt treatment are going to be very different. You'll have different product catalogs and service catalogs with different QA and regression testing approaches, and usually, not always, but usually different teams are going to maintain these product catalogs and service catalogs, and taxation treatments and complexity can be different. In the blue box, you see account structure. For wholesale M2M, you're going to have a fewer number of accounts with many products or subscriptions under that account. And that type of setup usually needs a much different configuration strategy across your BSS systems than a consumer or a retail wireless where you have many accounts, but with generally fewer products. And that's if you're lucky enough to have the type of system that can set all this up with configuration instead of coding or new enhancements or whatever. And also with regard to account structure, usually BSS system settings can be global, meaning that the same settings that you apply for your consumer business are going to necessarily be the same for your M2M or any other type of line of business that's sharing those systems. And so that can drive trade-offs. You might have to have some type of duplicate setup effort, or you can get into what I call lowest common denominator decision-making, where you kind of take the worst of all evils, or maybe even worse for the M2M line of business, they have to live with the decisions that are supporting the consumer retail business. And then in the green box for hardware integration, so M2M, I think one of the major requirements is you need to have event dispatch in minutes. You can't wait days or weeks to feed your client, your M2M client systems. And that can be because they need to perform their revenue assurance needs, or more critically, they may be using the usage records, or they call detail records, so the usage records, for their own value-added services or into their own self-care systems or to run their billing or what have you. So I spent a lot of years running the dev shop for a very large MVNE. We launched MVNO clients and did a lot of consulting internationally, and I was really astonished at the wide variation between operators globally and how fast they can get usage records to their wholesale customers. And from what I've seen, that situation is still pretty much in existence today, but for a wholesale customer, these records are so important to their business, and it's really vital that an operator is able to dispatch those events as fast as possible. Also along the lines of hardware integration, well, as far as integration, your interface points are different versus consumer wireless. For example, for payment processing, the way you do customer management and so on. And from a hardware and capacity planning perspective, retail and M2M, they strain a BSS in different ways. The load profile is really different if you have a single stack, and you have to use the worst combination for system sizing and capacity planning for how you're treating your peaks and valleys, which are quite different between the two lines of business. So looking at that light blue box at the bottom, I think we can conclude M2M is definitely not retail. That's pretty self-explanatory, and it's not B2B, where you have a very particular kind of account structure and set of business requirements to serve an enterprise market or a corporate market, not to mention what the operator needs to sell and support that type of customer. It's much different Salesforce and Salesforce automation and all of that. But finally, M2M is often lumped in with wholesale, whether MVNO business or other type of resale business. And even here, although there are more similarities than differences, you can still find some fundamental things that you need to consider, especially like problem management and SLAs and service assurance. I mean, an M2M device is not going to call customer care when something goes wrong. So your M2M client is going to be trying to solve the problem of proactive monitoring, whether active or passive. And in many cases, they're going to be looking to the operator to provide solutions here if they're not able to do it on their own. So continuing on from the previous points, the operational and organizational considerations of whether you want to share the same BSS and OSS systems between your consumer or other lines of business with your M2M business. The operational impacts, some of these would include you're going to have different requirements for high availability and SLAs. Maybe the need to have 365 availability of certain parts of your systems isn't going to be as important. Others will be. You don't need the same performance tuning techniques as I mentioned a moment ago. And then also bill runs. One line of business can run billing in a way that can cause unacceptable delays to the other. What happens to your retail quality of service if you're processing a massive aggregation and bill time discount process, for example? And reporting and revenue assurance processes can vary. Data quality control, billing quality control processes and tools are not going to be aligned from one model to the other to verify that everything's working properly. Archiving requirements can be different, and also release management can be more complicated. You might have more delays in your release management process because you have to regression test across so many different test cases. And then finally, in our blue box there, the organizational impacts. I think this is really the most relevant factor, is the organizational impacts. You've got retail, you've got B2B, you've got MVNO, you've got wireless, and these are usually different organizations with different management structure and, of course, very different internal priorities. And suffice to say, the poor M2M folks are usually not winning the ER prioritization battle when you're fighting for limited capacity in an IT system release. Other factors organizationally are that access control needs to be put in place to ensure that configuration doesn't get affected between the different lines of business, or that an M2M client service person's not muddling around in the retail systems and vice versa. The impact on M2M is that you might have a longer lead time to introduce new plans and pricing than you otherwise might. And business support and customer care, as I mentioned, are very different across the different lines of business. So ironically, with all the talk about machines, it may actually be the human factor that creates some of the biggest challenges. So for the successful solution, I'm going to go out on a limb now, and I'm going to suppose that we're really interested in a dedicated platform for M2M to enable all these new services that are going to drive the business and drive value. I'll assume we've made our business case, and leadership is convinced that the value and the growth warrant some investment. So now what? Well, I'm a solution guy, so let's start by asking ourselves, what are the solution impacts for and inputs for this type of endeavor? One that we hear a lot about is the unique business model. We have very different price plans and tariffs versus other wireless services for M2M. And the big talking point is always that M2M ARPU is less than $1 a month versus $20 to $40 for consumer wireless. Although I was at a breakfast earlier last year and saw a president of a very large North American operator give the analyst community a bit of a ribbing about the whole ARPU thing. He admonished them that he really just cares about revenue, and he could care less about ARPU, and he was quite happy with his M2M business when it came to the top line. So a bit of an anecdote about the ARPU there that I certainly took to heart. But definitely, some high-value applications can generate a lot of revenue, even more than retail, potentially, and certainly more profit. But another factor of the business model discussion is really the absolute requirement for enhanced automation and self-care to reduce headcount that's needed to support this business. There's a real focus on an ongoing lower cost of ownership, and we saw from Robin that it's a key area where M2M projects are focused right now. Our second box here is the business on a massive scale. With M2M, just the sheer volume of transactions is going to promise strong revenue generation. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of devices, potentially generating different types of revenue, maybe micro usage charges even. But the flip side to all of that is that legacy systems usually can't, or often can't, process, aggregate, summarize these types of volumes, especially when it's all getting loaded up under a single account. And as I alluded to before, both batch and as this market matures, real-time are going to need to be supported. And then finally, we'll spend a bit of time now on the complexity of that multi-party value chain diagram that we were looking at. So, I mean, M2M is going to involve numerous partners, a highly complex value chain, the long value chain. And when you start to include multiple parties or many different client business needs, that can potentially cause the need to drive a different order flow, either on a per client basis or maybe even within one client, you might have to support multiple possible order flows. So how do you deal with that? Well, with M2M, there's without a doubt the need to allow for future inclusion of third parties into the mix from either a revenue share, a commissioning standpoint, or maybe just shared operational responsibilities or shared logistics responsibilities. So we can assume that an M2M BSS and OSS platform needs to support both retail and wholesale pricing models. And to support clients and third parties, you need to be able to dispatch events to support clients' reconciliation, other operational needs, and you need to do it probably faster than you are today, as I mentioned earlier. So just doing a time check. I'm going to hurry past this slide a little bit, but suffice to say you need to have a lot of different ways to rate and bill for this stuff. And on the bottom right there, I'm looking for a really good prepaid M2M use case. So if you have one, please call me or find me on LinkedIn. So here we're on the business process discussion, and I just mentioned the need to support different order flows on a per client basis or even within clients. And this is more than just for orders, right? So logistics, activation, implementing network policies, how you handle number inventory is huge, and it's an imminent problem as we start running out of mobile numbers. There's going to be way too many devices to keep up with the permutations of numbers that are available to operators. How you handle plan changes and lifecycle management or device life cycles, and the way you provide support and assurance, these are all very relevant, and you need to be able to do all this without a major IT project every time you want to make a change. So here we have the view from TM Forum, and also for time, I'll skip past this a little bit, other than to say that at NetCracker we're big believers in TM Forum. I've spent a lot of time working with clients to assess their M2M programs against this is called the 3-block architecture from TMF, and certainly we've looked at this and been influenced by it for our own solutions here at NetCracker. So finally, we get to our findings from our solution architecture analysis, and I would summarize it as follows. First, a solution has to have self-service to reduce the cost to serve. You can't have an army of customer support people serving the M2M business. They can't support the cost. So it's a mandatory component of the architecture, and would always need to include both web-based portals and APIs. So that we can serve clients of varying IT sophistication. Some are just going to need or want the web portal, and it's also a convenient tool for the operator themselves. We do believe that BSS is at the center of the architecture for M2M, and I would include product order management and service order management into the BSS category for that statement. The BSS has to have flexibility, it has to have scalability to support the high volumes of transactions, and it has to be ready to support custom execution flows for every client's automated business processes. Now, I'm not saying that BSS is more important than OSS here, but if we're talking about a dedicated platform for M2M, what we've seen is that OSS components are often successfully reused from the existing network infrastructure. The key is you need to be able to provide the tools that allow a customer to manage their devices independently. And I'll put an asterisk next to the IN here. or an FTP or these types of charging solutions that can live on the network, because it's definitely a bit of a battleground between network and IT, and in our view, it's an area that needs some real careful deliberation. But for the purposes of today's discussion, I'm gonna gloss over that a little bit. And finally, this last statement here: wireless connectivity is not a differentiator. Maybe with the treatment of the different 2G, 3G, 4G LTE networks, there's something to that that's maybe not totally true, but I think that for the most part that'll prove out to be the fact. And we do also need to consider device management, and although the connectivity itself isn't a differentiator, the ability to surface network capabilities is absolutely one. And being able to introduce policy control and putting those tools in the hands of an M2M client, I think would be very powerful. But for today's area of focus, again, we're excluding device management and configuration and home and DM and all of that from our agenda. So I'll move on to the next slide about controlling operational costs. And really, in a nutshell, the question, I think, is was your platform designed from the start to be optimized for M2M? Because so often the trouble that people get into is trying to use the wrong set of tools for the job. At NetCracker, our perspective is if your company is serious about M2M as a growth engine, you need to have a dedicated platform, usually. You need to give your M2M clients a really great portal so they can self-serve for activation, network actions, looking at their subscribers, let them see the status of the network without having to call you up and ask if something's down. Provide automated tools like alarms and alerts so they can monitor their devices both actively and passively if they don't have that capability themselves based on how they're manufacturing their devices. And then make sure you have the ability to dynamically generate workloads rather than try and pre-build a whole bunch of business logic and workflows into your middleware ahead of time. And for launching your clients, you need to have a great boarding process for your platform, and it needs to be as turnkey as possible. You need to provide these types of optimization tools like a bulk upload utility. And on the human side of machine-to-machine, work very hard to develop really strong partnerships between the business side and the IT team. IT is there to support the business, and that's really important. So really, kind of moral of the story, M2M business model really needs automation and self-service. These are the keys to success in controlling your operational costs. So now, after all this build-up, we're really going to get to the heart of the matter. And as I just emphasized, to enable a rapid client launch, you have to have a platform designed for clients. Why? Well, one thing is if you have that and you have a proven ability to rapidly launch clients, that's going to attract more clients. And it'll also let you hedge your bets because some of these clients will succeed and some won't. And you want to have as many clients as possible on this platform. And then following on from that, that means that you need to have a platform that supports multi-tenancy, and you have to have a plan for the ones that really grow and grow fast. To scale them, they're going to require more resources, more processing power, and you need to have a plan and be ready to dedicate some system resources to those winners. And adding a new client, it can't come in a feature release. It can't come as part of an IT project. It needs to be something that you can do as the normal course of business. The other point on the platform design for clients is that you want to have your system interfaces be SOA-based so that you can future-proof. If you need to swap out a system in the future, you want to insulate yourself with a SOA-based application architecture. So the partner launch checklist, what this really means is if you have this platform and you know how to get someone onto it, you're going to have a well-designed client setup process. It's going to be straightforward configuration, and this really describes the pre-built tool that you'll have that'll capture all the data you need, all the business projections of your client, all that you need to configure them and get them onto this platform. And that can be Excel, it can be Word, it can be something more fancy and Portal-ish or whatever. But usually at least 3 parties need to contribute, and it really needs to have an experienced coordinator or project manager to really own that process, own that deliverable from end to end through to the client launch. And then as I've spoken about a fair amount, the culture of partnership, I think that it's so important that the goals of all the internal stakeholders are aligned. We've had at NetCracker great success repeatedly with a managed service partnership model, and even operators who just wouldn't even consider it, have actually arrived at this approach after several years, and it's really worked wonderfully. And as we get into more advanced services, we can start to think about developing an ecosystem of other types of partners, third-party VAS partners, and really getting into that broad set of industries and verticals that Robin showed earlier in our discussion, and being able to add really neat upsells and add-ons to your platform that you can sell to your M2M clients. And then finally, just one note on culture of partnership. You never forget to publicize success internally and externally. So on the boarding document, I was going to dive a bit deeper into our approach for the boarding document tool. This is an asset that we have at NetCracker, but since we are pressed for time, I'll skip past it. If this is really something of interest to you, give us a call or visit netcracker.com or use our Q&A time coming up here in a moment. So client launch. So this is it. This is the 30-day slide, and as I've built this up and explained about having a dedicated platform and one that's configurable with the ability to rapidly adapt business processes, I trust that this will be a credible statement now. I can assure you it's a process that we follow with operators that are household names in production today, and it's about launching these clients with true configuration, not an IT project or a big ER or a release cycle that follows the software development lifecycle, or even resorting to iterative and scrumming and all that. The other thing to mention is that many M2M clients are probably quite new to telephony. They're going to be more focused on their fleet tracking software or some newfangled medical device or their consumer marketing plan or whatever. And it's very probably a small company or at least a small team of people assigned to make this work and interface with the operator. All the acronyms and the way the operators work is going to be foreign. So another thing to keep in mind is that the operator relationship is just a small part of what they're probably dealing with. Operators need to make it as easy as possible for a client to own their own success. And part of that is making sure there's a clear process to get your new client live, and that they're held responsible for their own parts and the operator stays accountable for theirs. And this type of a timeline with clear entrance criteria, clear exit criteria to get from setup and kickoff in the first week as you kind of form the teams and figure out how it's all going to work and get into your, and I say development here, but it's really configuration and testing, and then getting ready for production launch and working through your ops book and how they're going to handle production support and training them on this awesome self-care portal that you built for them. These are all the steps that are going to make this work. And for the math majors in the audience who are trying to figure out the 30 days from a 5 week, well, I guess we'll have to agree to call it 25 business days, and I guess we always have to add 5 days of contingency. Has been my experience. So, moving on then to the easiest way to miss a 30-day go live. So, the point of this slide is not to make you squint and try and read. This is actually a real-life activation process diagram. But the point here is let's illustrate how complex a lot of these telecom processes can be, and this is even part of the process. But my promise to you, if you really want to miss a 30-day go live, and I mean this with the best of intentions and with heartfelt admiration for my brethren that have one of the hardest jobs in IT, but the easiest way will be to head over to your middleware team and tell them they need to modify a bunch of business logic to support your next M2M client. Because if you've got a magic way of working with this in your company, then great, but otherwise the answer is going to be 99% of the time, get in line. We've got a zillion other projects, and you're just not a priority right now. And in all seriousness, this really is a way of saying to be very, very careful in your architecture about the role of your middleware. And I'm not saying middleware is a bad thing. It's critical, but those teams are just overwhelmed with the growing complexity in all the telco services they're supporting. And it's like a massive Jenga game where you try and pull out one business process and 20 others are going to fall down all over the place in regression testing. And for my soapbox, I'll say that I think our industry has lost its way a little bit here, and we need to try and get back to leveraging middleware for transaction delivery and not as a store of business logic. And at NetCracker, we've been working with these teams in the middleware teams and with our business sponsors to help delicately pull apart this workflow and introduce a more catalog-driven approach so we can deliver on the promise of a 30-day client launch. So with that, I'll thank everyone for their time, and also especially to thank Jeremy and Robin for their remarks and insights. And I think, Jeremy, it's time for our poll now. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, Tulsi. Well, thank you to you and to Robin for sharing your experiences. I think that's already given us a much better understanding of M2M service rollouts and even of how to miss or not to miss a 30-day rollout deadline. I really like that. Anyway, as Tulsi says, before we go any further, this would be a good moment for us to ask each of you to share your experiences in our poll. All you have to do is click on one option in the multiple choice answers now on your screen. Just go with whichever most closely reflects your view. And the question we want to ask you is this: what do you think is an operator's best strategy for M2M? Is it use a SaaS provider, share the existing BSS, OSS, use a dedicated stack for wholesale, or don't bother with M2M? And we'll bring you those results later. First of all, I'm just going to read those over again to make sure that everyone's got it. And please remember that these replies are totally anonymous. The panelists here have no idea how individual delegates to the webinar have replied, so you can really speak your mind. What do you think is an operator's best strategy for M2M? Use a SaaS provider, share the existing BSS OSS, use a dedicated stack for wholesale, or don't bother with M2M at all? Well, I can see that questions are already in, and please do keep them coming. There's still time for us to receive them. So let's go straight away to our first questioner. It's a delegate in North America has asked, Tulsi, if you could give us a definition that as you're using it here, of service provider.
Sure. Yeah. So by service provider, that's the mobile operator, the communication service provider, someone who's providing services to kind of enterprises or VARs that are selling M2M services, or potentially selling them themselves directly as a retail model.
I see. You picked on middleware as an area that can inhibit growth of M2M. Are there any other problem areas?
Yeah, and I may have some interesting conversations the next time I'm with some of my clients about that, but I do stand by that. Other areas, I mentioned IN and kind of SCP as areas that I've seen kind of be kept hands off by many operators, especially in engineering or network departments. And I think that's an area that as the business is going to demand more and more the need for real-time control of devices or policy control or the ability to do active monitoring, it's going to be really important for network teams to partner with IT and the business to enable different ways of accessing and controlling the network without making it a long project or just a hands-off approach, I think.
Yeah, one of the delegates here, Tulsi, has asked, is curious about your use of the term catalog-driven architecture. Can you expand on that for them?
Yeah. So I mean, and I'm a bit biased in my view here, but at NetCracker, our whole architecture is governed by the idea that we don't have a separate place where we configure and maintain plans and products, and then have all the rules for workflow or order management, in a separate place. All the information that we need to present and capture and fulfill an order, we actually build it into our product definition. So, we're trying to get back to the idea of a pure SOA architecture where you really have the functional application domains doing their job, and then the ESB or the middleware acting as a true message bus, a delivery system, and not a store of complex business logic. So, it's a pretty straightforward way of looking at things, and I've really seen it pay real-life dividends for operators that take that approach.
Yeah, I see that most of the questions seem to be for you for the moment, Tulsi, but I'll come to Robin in a minute, if I may. Just for now, I'll ask you to hang on to the microphone. Do you think, one person has asked, operators should be developing competencies that's for specific industry verticals?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as an evolution. I mean, if we think about the value chain that both Robin and I showed, the different versions of. I mean, if you're an operator, a mobile service provider, communication service provider, I think if you want to be in the M2M business, you really have to make sure you get the basics right first. You have to have, your M2M platform, or some will call it a connected device platform. Make your network available in a way that can get clients, launched rapidly and make modifications, once they're live, easily. But yeah, then it's absolutely relevant to have a sales team or a focus on going after particular market segments. And, it may be that it's faster to partner with specialized providers first that have domain expertise, but I see operators being able to build, very strong kind of revenue pipelines with that type of a specialization.
That seems pretty fair. Tulsi, I'll ask you just to stand down for a second. I'd want to come back to you in a moment. But Robin, this is a question for you. I wondered if you could help us here. In which industry verticals have you seen the most challenging deployments? That's quite a challenging question in itself.
Well, yes, it's probably the ones that started first, actually, because M2M has been around for quite a long time, but not necessarily called M2M. And it started, of course, in the fixed line business. Building automation type solutions have been around for a while, and so have industrial automation processes and solutions. So those tend to be probably the most sophisticated at the moment. There's also healthcare fixed assets, which have also tended to be connected with fixed lines. So what happens typically with an M2M solution is that somebody starts off with a fairly simple idea, and that gets return on investment and payback criteria, and that gets then implemented. But we then tend to go through a series of phases, a series of evolutionary phases of a build-up of M2M opportunities, if you like. So once there is a basic understanding within an organization of how to use data from remote devices, then it tends to be used in other areas. So we move more towards IT integration and so forth. And the most advanced areas now will tend to be those ones that I've just mentioned, the industrial, healthcare, and related areas.
Mm. Tulsi, can you give us some examples of where an operator would need to have a custom business logic for each client? One of our delegates is keen to know a bit more about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's lots of areas where it could be needed. I mean, you could have, it could be the way that SIMs are being ordered. So you may have integration to a factory floor for, getting manufacturing status of devices as they go through the manufacturing process. You might need to have different integrations to logistics providers like Brightpoint or FedEx or DHL or whatever that, when you want to know when they provide the ship advice, or you get receipt notification of a bulk order of SIMs, getting to them, and then that can then drive other processes downstream. You might have different manufacturing partners or a special software setup that has to happen as part of logistics. So there's all of that part of things. And then for the network integration, you might want to ship SIMs hot or cold or warm, and that'll drive special business rules about, how the subscription is set up in your internal systems. Maybe you have special stock codes based on the different statuses, or it's going to drive different billing tariffs to charge differently depending on where a device is in the life cycle. So, and a lot of times there'll be, based on the deal, unique business logic. So the salesperson will go out there and strike up an awesome bargain with someone, and that's going to drive changes. And if there's a big revenue opportunity, you want to make sure IT is an enabler for that, not a bottleneck.
Understood. Here's a question that you kind of touched on in your presentation, but there's so much more that could be said. One delegate has asked, with multiple events in an all-IP world, won't M2M and BSS architecture capabilities converge? Why build a new OTT silo?
Well, I mean, I think that was a lot of, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but I think a lot of what I was trying to say is that, under the covers, there's not a lot that's different about M2M from other types of lines of business. I mean, you still need to activate devices and you still need to bill. But when you really get into the organizational issues and the operational issues, I do feel that what I've seen, at least with the clients that I've worked with, that having that separate silo, if you will, or the separate platform that's dedicated to that business and growing it, as long as the revenue is justifying the investment, then I think it's probably a better choice for most operators.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment. One U.S. operator has asked, can you please expand on what you mean by the quote, wireless connectivity is not a differentiator?
Yeah, no, I know, maybe another controversial comment. I mean, really all that I was saying is that, any operator or mobile service provider that wants to serve M2M clients, they're offering connectivity, and absolutely yes. And as I said, maybe the way that one operator is treating older networks like 2G, might be a differentiator. But what I mean is really, the ability to provide the pipe isn't going to make the difference. I think it's going to be how easy you are to do business with. Are you offering other value-added services? How fast can you launch me? How fast can you make changes that I asked for? How flexible are you going to be on the types of rating tariffs that you offer? And I think those are the types of things that are going to draw M2M clients. And the more you can do for them in order to grow their business, then the more clients you draw and the more successful you'll help make them and yourself.
We're being inundated in questions, and we'll never be able to get through them all, but I want to thank everybody for submitting them. There's time for just one more, and again, it's for you, Tulsi, if you don't mind. It's a good one. Are communication service providers with a global footprint, and the delegate gives the example of Vodafone, in a better position to launch M2M services?
Well, I think the answer is it depends. I think that if the client, the M2M client, needs that global footprint, then yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot to that, and I think we've seen other operators announce more kind of global alliances that allow them to have that kind of the global footprint on offer. And I think for that type of application, sure. I think that a lot of the applications and maybe Robin might want to chime in here as well, but a lot of M2M applications can also tend to be more localized. But certainly I think there's obviously strength in scale. Robin, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, yes, it depends entirely on what the requirement is. If a global footprint is required, then obviously you would want to have an international operator. But then there are lots of different ways of having global footprint as well. It could be through a reseller that has international footprint as well. So I think it needs to be a little bit more specific. I think there are advantages that Vodafone can offer, but I don't think that it's unique in offering global footprint. And I think, as Tulsi said, it also depends just how broad the requirement is for local national type of activities. It's a lot of different criteria that tend to be more prominent. So it's horses for courses, really.
Yeah, you took the very words out of my mouth. I think that's a very good way of summing it up. Thank you both for those replies, gentlemen. On behalf of all of our delegates, I'm very grateful. Now, to one and all, I promised that we'd bring you the poll results before we close, and if you remember, the poll question was, what do you think is an operator's best strategy for M2M? Well, by a comfortable margin, use a dedicated stack for wholesale was the response from our delegates, and that was 52.3%, so well over half. Then came 28.5% saying share the existing BSS or OSS, almost 28%. And then the SaaS provider, use a SaaS provider, which gives some initial flexibility anyway for those who are sticking a toe in the water. Tulsi, are these results in line with your expectations?
Yeah, no, I think it actually is pretty consistent with what I've seen in the marketplace. Yeah, it's nice to see that the community is sharing that view.
Robin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think it all depends on exactly what you mean by a SaaS provider and whether it's at the sort of network level or the application level. And it also depends on the time period as well. So I think that if you look at a longer time period, then those kinds of answers make a lot of sense. It's all about speed to market and getting new solutions and revenues to market quickly for an operator in the solutions environment, and that might then be a different result. But I think in the longer term, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, one can only wonder at the past experience of the 2% who argued don't bother with M2M at all, but there clearly seems to be a lot of enthusiasm for a dedicated stack. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and delegates, thank you all for your participation. We're almost out of time, but please remember, do keep an eye on our website at www.m2mnow.biz for more webinars coming along in the pipeline. And before we go, I'd just like to say a really big thank you. First to Tulsi Zeidman of NetCracker for his eye-opening presentation. I think we've learned a lot from that today, Tulsi.
Jeremy.
And Robin, also, I'd like to thank you very warmly for your contribution. It's been constructive and independent as always.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Gentlemen, it's been a great discussion. Thanks for taking the time to answer the questions so carefully. And most of all, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us wherever you are today. We really appreciate the time you spent with us and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.